All right, welcome back to Blake's Black Book. Today, I wanted to talk about a topic other than current events, um, something that has been my fascination for the past 6, 7, 8 months, something like that. Um, I've been reading books about it and watching videos and watching like interviews and all kinds of stuff. Um, and that topic would be mind control. Some people think mind control is like a myth, like that it's not possible. I guess I would hope more people are aware now that MK Ultra was declassified. That was like the program where that came from like other. They had other projects before that, like Project Bluebird, Project Artichoke, where the government, particularly the CIA, um, was trying to find ways to control people's minds, essentially, and influence people, get people to do what they wanted to do, create Manchurian candidates that could be assassins or sex slaves, pass off messages between high level officials, um, all kinds of stuff like that. Um, and something I kind of got interested in this particular, I guess, lane that I'm going to go down um, from a documentary I watched with my girlfriend the other day called "The Cult Behind the Killer: The Andrea Yates Story." Um, now, if you haven't seen it, it's on HBO Max. You might be able to find it other places. But essentially, it's about this lady, Andrea Yates, who kind of got influenced um, by this guy, Michael Woroniecki, who was like a preacher that kind of would go around to universities, and he was like one of those people holding signs and "You're gonna go to hell" and all this type of stuff. Um, this lady kind of got involved, her and her husband, and there was other families that this guy kind of had some influence over. Um, Long story short, I mean, I don't spoiler alert. I guess if you haven't seen it, um, well, actually, you probably just Google it, so it's not too much of a spoil. Either way, this lady had 5 kids and ended up drowning all 5 of them, um, because it was to save them, essentially to keep them from going to hell and all kinds of stuff. It's a crazy story. Definitely recommend the documentary. It's got like 3 parts, I think. Yeah, 3 episodes. Definitely a pretty wild story. But like I said, it this lady was kind of influenced by this guy, um, Michael Warnicki. Um, I don't. Let me try to figure out how to. So basically, when it there's so many different lanes you could take with mind control, but I think the best way to start is a lot of the mind control tactics used, at least kind of during like I guess the 70s, 80s, 90s. I mean, I'm sure it's still going on. A lot of it had to do with occult, ritualistic, sexual based, trauma based um, programming, where they would take kids and do all these horrible things to them. If you read "Transformation of a Nation" by Kathy O'Neill, let's find it. I had it pulled up. She talks about all that type of stuff and how it started when she was a kid and there was generational abuse going on, and incestual abuse amongst her family, like her father and um, all kinds of stuff. But there's all these other connections you could make to mind control, um, and a lot of it, from what I read, especially in this book in Trance, and from what I've heard from other stuff, seems to be mostly religious based or extraterrestrial based. Like that's kind of what they use to mess with these people's minds and get them to, I don't know, they disconnect from reality because with a lot of the trauma and abuse, um, with the rituals and stuff like that, um, a lot of it is meant to basically create multiple personality disorder, or DID is what it's called now. I think that's dissociative identity disorder. Um, but it's basically to create different personalities, or alters is something else they're also called, um, that can do all these different tasks. And I mean, there's too much to explain. Like I would definitely recommend starting with this book, and reading through it, and it'll give you some good background. Um, but what stood out to me when we were watching this documentary was how they kept talking about um, butterflies, and the Wizard of Oz came up. Um, and to most people, that just sounds like, okay, they're talking about butterflies and the Wizard of Oz. What's the big fucking deal? But if you've read these books, and then there's also um, another book, Thanks for the Memories by Bryce Taylor, or Sue Ford, who was kind of basically went through the same stuff as Kathy O'Brien did. Um, it says here she details her experiences as a victim of mind control abuse by high-profile individuals like Bob Hope, who's a comedian and traveled around the world and did like OS tours and stuff like that. OSO tours, or USO tours, whatever they do for the military. And Henry Kissinger, who's up there with probably top 5, top 10 worst people who, or at least worst people for this country. Explores the themes of trauma, manipulation, and the dark side of power dynamics in society. And like I said, in France, by Kathy O'Brien, she talks about being abused by different senators where she was from in Michigan, like local, state, um, federal, presidents, Gerald Ford, George H.W. Bush, Dick Cheney. Um, there's all kinds of stuff. But with Kathy, she grew up Catholic, and a lot of her programming revolved around religion, and particularly Jesuit ideas, Catholicism. She told a story about being abused by one of the priests during confession. So that just shows you kind of where that was at. But the things that got me, like I said, they kept mentioning in this documentary butterflies and Wizard of Oz, and that was stuff that Kathy O'Brien pointed out a bunch that had to do with programming and different stuff like that. And then here is a video actually of Bryce Taylor, or Sue Ford, I think was her real name, and then she changed it to Bryce Taylor when she was on the run or whatever. But she was the one who wrote the book, Thanks for the Memories. And here's a clip of her at a MK Ultra testimony in 1999. You can find this video. I took a clip because I had to take a clip, but here's what I thought was pretty fascinating. She talks about it too. All right. So there she was talking about, the different themes that are used for the programming and stuff like that. So besides those things, themes coming up a bunch in the documentary, like a bunch. It was hard for me to not notice, and it was. I mean, it was crazy how, especially how much they talked about like butterflies and stuff. And if you don't know, the reason that butterflies is such a big deal um, is because MK Ultra, an offshoot of that was Project Monarch, which was mostly the one aimed at um, child abuse and creating the different personalities and all that type of stuff. And here, if you look it up, it's considered well, it says, of course, conspiracy theory. Claims to be a sub-project of the CIA's MK Ultra program, allegedly involving mind control and trauma-based programming. However, there is no credible evidence to supporting these claims. They have been widely criticized by scholars, of course, blah, blah, blah. If you look it up, I think it's actually, I forgot, it's like sub-project 58 and sub-project 1, like I just looked them up the other day, but if you get a FOIA request, I'm sure you can find out more about it and kind of see where the Project Monarch thing comes from. But here is a reason that butterflies were so big. And then here it mentions Kathy O'Brien talking about it a lot. The alleged methods include hypnosis, trauma, dissociative identity disorder, purportedly used to create mind-controlled individuals. Project Monarch. Oh, shit. Well, either way. Why the Illuminati use butterflies to symbolize. Project Monarch. Okay, well, this is definitely not it. Well, they also mentioned the significance in the documentary. It basically has to do with, I mean, it's like a butterfly. You go into a cocoon, and then, which is all the abuse and trauma and everything, programming, and then you come out as a butterfly, which you're mind controlled and kind of at their mercy. Here's some more. Multiple personality disorder uses a combination of psychology, neuroscience, occult rituals to create within the slaves an alter personality that can be triggered or programmed by the handlers. Monarch slaves are used by several organizations connected with the world elite in fields such as military, sex slavery, and the entertainment industry. So here, this looks like a good article. It's all about. But they mentioned butterflies and all this stuff a bunch, and it got me thinking because, I mean, the title of the documentary is The Cult Behind the Killer. So it kind of made me think of other cults where mind control seems to have been a factor, which now I'm starting to believe. I haven't done enough research, but I'm starting to believe it's most cults have been influenced by they're being controlled. For example, like Charles Manson back in the day, it was known he went to like the Haight Ashbury Clinic, where Dr. Jolly West was his doctor, and Jolly West is like infamous for being involved with mind control and hypnosis and all these different things. He went and visited Jack Ruby in prison after he killed Lee Harvey Oswald, and when he left, Jack Ruby was, went crazy. So God knows what he did to him. But that's one example. The Manson family. If you read Chaos by Tom O'Neill, let me see, and they actually have a documentary about this one too on Netflix, but they obviously leave out plenty of stuff. Like Netflix is good about giving you some, like it's a limited hangout in a sense. Like you get a lot of good information, but they also leave out some of the really good stuff. But if you watch the documentary or read the book, It's called Chaos, Charles Manson, the CIA, and the Secret History of the 60s. It was written by Tom O'Neill, who was a guy writing a newspaper article about like the 20th anniversary or 15th anniversary or something of the Manson murders. And he started finding all these other connections and going down other rabbit holes, and ended up working on it for like 20, 30 years and turned it into a book instead of a magazine article. But basically he discussed how he here's what it says: explores the Manson family murders and questions the official narrative surrounding them, revealing potential cover-ups and connections to intelligence agencies. um, like there was all kinds of weird stuff where Charles Manson would go to prison, do some crazy stuff, and then get out right away, kind of like Jeffrey Epstein with the whole sweetheart deal and everything like that. Like so there's that for sure. um so I kind of started thinking about other cults, and like Jonestown is another one with Jim Jones. He had connections with the CIA and stuff that eventually I'll go down that go down that rabbit hole more, make some videos. But here we go. So I got fascinated with Michael Woroniecki and started looking into him. It says he has a Catholic family, or he was from a large Catholic family. He studied psychology at Central Michigan University, which is interesting considering what he went on to do. He was a big football player, all this type of stuff. Got hurt. I don't know, got a calling from God that he needed to go and start preaching. Here's again Roman Catholic, and like that doesn't necessarily mean not all Catholics are involved in this type of stuff, but from what I gather, the Catholics, Jesuits, are very involved, which I mean shouldn't be surprising because Catholic priests are notorious for their diddling and extracurricular activities with little boys. But it's not too shocking, but it's just something that kind of stood out to me too, how he has all these connections to Catholicism. Also, it says he was from Michigan, Grand Rapids, Michigan, which doesn't necessarily mean anything either, but Kathy O'Brien was from Michigan, and there's a lot more I'll have to go into with that one, because there's connections with the John Benet Ramsey case and North Fox Island, where there was, a whole Epstein-esque, Franklin scandal-esque thing going on. That's for another video. But then it talks about how he went to Melodyland School of Theology, which I looked up, and it says here, is a charismatic evangelical church in Anaheim, California. Established in 1969 when Pastor Ralph Wilkerson purchased and converted the Melodyland Theater, a 3,000-seat theater in the round, built in 1963, with a hub for spiritual renewal. Drew Sunday attendances of up to 18,000 in the 70s or 80s. So kind of like Joel Osteen and those mega churches that are corrupt as hell. And this was the part that really stood out to me though. It said the church is situated on 12.5 acres near Disneyland at 400 West Freedom Way. So Disney in general, it comes up a lot in Kathy O'Brien's book, with other people who have been abused. It's kind of famous that there's like theories about the tunnels underneath Disney and all the kids are being trafficked and all that. That's not completely crazy. From the stuff I read, it's actually accurate. There's a lot of weird stuff that goes on with Disney at Disneyland. Like Walt Disney was a weird dude. He was involved with the occult and all that type of stuff. And he wanted to create Epcot, which is like the first 15-minute city. Look that up. He was a pretty wild dude. And Disney, Kathy O'Brien mentioned she was taken to Disney World or Disneyland, whichever one's in Florida, multiple times to be reprogrammed. And she was also taken to like the NASA or different NASA facilities and military bases and stuff like that, which is something else that stood out to me about this documentary. Andrea Yates, her husband, Rusty Yates, actually worked at NASA. So, I mean, I don't know, doesn't necessarily mean anything, but from what I was getting, it seemed more like he was a handler and he was probably responsible for taking, not necessarily taking her to get programmed, but he probably learned some stuff from NASA. Or I haven't looked into him enough, but I'm sure there's probably more to him. And I mean, in the documentary, he just seems weird, like talking about, the case and his 5 kids dying, and like there's weird vibes there. So I'm not necessarily convinced that he's not involved, and the fact that he worked at NASA was just kind of stood out to me because there's other connections. So that was about the Melody Land. Wasn't there's all kinds of other stuff there, but it was a mega church, and it's been bought up by like another school or something now, and they've changed the name and all this stuff. But after that, that was in 76. Here in 1978, Woroniecki was accepted at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. So again, California, I don't know necessarily how far that is from Haight-Ashbury, Anaheim, or Pasadena, but there was a lot of stuff and studying going on with like Operation Midnight Climax, where they were getting Johns off the street to come in with prostitutes, and then they would dose the dudes and kind of watch their reactions and all that type of stuff, see how if they could control them or influence, all that type of weird stuff that actually happened. So I looked up Fuller because it fascinated me. They have a lot of programs for mental health and clinical psychology, which, I mean, I guess that's what they do at seminaries. I thought they just taught you about like God or the Bible or some shit. So I was kind of looking through their website, and this is something else that stood out to me. It made me think there might be some connections to Michael Woroniecki and mind control and all that. Here is 2 different, I guess, articles about these big grants given to Fuller by Lilly Endowment, which Lilly Endowment, I looked up because I wasn't for sure, but I thought it was probably connected to Eli Lilly, which is the giant pharmaceutical company. And when you look it up, headquartered in Indianapolis, Indiana, one of the world's largest private philanthropic foundations and among the largest endowments in the United States. Founded in 1937 by Josiah K. Lilly Sr. and his sons Eli Jr. and Josiah Jr., with an initial gift of Eli Lilly and Company stock valued at $280,000. As of 2023, its total assets are worth more than $62.2 billion. Lilly Endowment has historically focused on 3 primary grant areas: community development, education, Christianity. It is known as the most influential philanthropy in its home city and state. Its funding of projects related to religion is unusually large among foundations. Its funding of projects related to religion is unusually large among foundations. Okay. So yeah, there's a lot of money moving in and out there. Lilly Endowment, and I was right, it was connected to Eli Lilly. And obviously pharmaceutical companies are messed up as it is. Everyone kind of knows that. But I was interested, like Eli Lilly. I was interested in looking up him and being like, well, what did Eli Lilly, did pharmaceutical companies, did they have anything to do with did he have any interest in mind control or anything like that? And I'm trying to find the one that I already had. Well, I tried to Google it live, or look it up live, but basically this is what I found. Um, it's an article from the History of Human Sciences from 2019, on modified human agents, John Lilly and the paranoid style in American neuroscience. Um, so obviously I'm not going to read the whole thing. Here's some keywords that showed up: brainwashing, Cold War, counterculture, hippies, history of psychology, blah blah blah. But let me read some of the abstract though, because I read through it and I thought it was kind of interesting that this endowment started by this guy, or not started by this guy, but his dad, they gave all this um, money and had all this influence over different colleges and organizations and stuff like that. Um, so it says the personal papers of the neural physiologist John C. Lilly at Stanford University, Stanford Prison Project. Some weird stuff going on there with psychology. Look into that. Um, John C. Lilly at Stanford University. The personal papers of the neurophysiologist John C. Lilly at Stanford University hold a classified paper he wrote in the late 1950s on the behavioral modification and control of human agents. The paper provides an unnerving prognosis of the future application of Lilly's research, then being carried out at the National Institute of Mental Health. Lilly claimed that the use of sensory isolation, electrostimulation of the brain, and the recording and mapping of brain activity could be used to gain push-button control over motivation and behavior. This research, wrote Lilly, could eventually lead to master-slave controls directly of one brain over another. The paper is an explicit example of Lilly's preparedness to align his research towards Cold War military aims. It is not, however, the research for which Lilly is best known. During the 1960s and 1970s, Lilly developed cult status as a far-out guru of consciousness exploration, promoting the use of psychedelics and sensory isolation tanks. I mean, MK Ultra, a lot of it was about LSD and dosing people with LSD and seeing the effects that it could have, and trying to, the influence that it could um, give you over people. So, he's big into that. It seems like he's big into the counterculture. So maybe another connection to the Manson family somehow, or Haight-Ashbury Clinic, something like that. Lilly argued, rather than being used as tools of brainwashing, these techniques could be employed by the individual to regain control of their own mind and retain a sense of agency over their thoughts and actions. This article examines the scientific, intellectual, and cultural relationship between the sciences of brainwashing and psychedelic mind alteration. So, I don't know, maybe it seems like, maybe he had a little bit of a conscience there at the end, where he's trying to help people who have been mind controlled regain control of their own minds. That's something Kathy O'Brien talks about in the book. Her husband, Mark Phillips, helps kind of deprogram her. I haven't looked through too much more of this, but I want to see what else there is here. This is crazy. In the 1950s, Lilly's claims to be able to manipulate behavior also piqued the interest of a number of U.S. military and intelligence officials, of course, interested in how new technologies in the neurosciences could be employed to control human and animal minds. In an unpublished paper from the 1950s, Lilly described how his experiments in isolation and neuroelectric stimulation of the brain could be used to modify and control the minds of enemy operatives. Well, what if the enemies happen to be us, the citizens? So there's that. Go down the look into it more, but all that to say, for me, I could be grasping at straws, but I don't know. It just seems like there's a lot of connections, strings that, dots that kind of can be connected. I don't feel like I'm really reaching. It seems pretty logical if you think about it, and how, the Lilly endowment gives money to this seminary where this guy went and, could have learned techniques to control people's mind, or, he could have learned different things. I'm kind of just hypothesizing, but it was definitely something I thought was weird. And like I said, if you read the book Transformation of a Nation by Kathy O'Brien, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, I'm dropping stuff. Oh god, oh god, oh, oh, let me get myself fixed here. Man, I was doing so good too. Man, video was like A1. Let me get this sheet back. There you go. I don't know what the hell I was saying. Either way, there just seemed like some odd connections to me. So I don't know. Thought it was fascinating, something to think about, something to look into. Yeah, well, if you made it this long, made it this far, like, subscribe, share, help me out. Appreciate you. See you next time. Thanks.